In today's video, we have the latest updates on the Mitch Marner contract saga between him and the Toronto Maple Leafs. Plus, we also have some other RFA signings, including Pavel Zacha as well as Kevin Fiala. Coach Cassidy in Boston's been extended. And we also have some updates on Patrick Marleau, Patrice Bergeron, and others. We'll get all the latest news coming up next. So welcome back here to Top Shelf Hockey. Now we have a lot to cover in today's video, and first of all I want to get started with the news that Jake Gardiner had other offers to consider besides the Carolina Hurricanes contract that he ultimately signed and accepted, but there was an offer on the table from the rival Montreal Canadiens that we had talked about before. They'd been rumored to be in the mix, and they actually ended up offering Gardiner more money than the Hurricanes did, but it was a little bit less term. Ultimately he ended up signing a 4-year contract with the Hurricanes, but it's believed he was offered a 3-year contract from the Habs, but it was a little bit more money, and he ultimately rejected that offer and ended up signing in Carolina. I think there's a couple of things that went into that. One, after playing in Toronto for so long and getting all the pressure from the media, it's really just as much in Montreal. I think he really wanted to go to a place where that kind of spotlight was a little quieter and obviously would kind of take the pressure off that way, and when dealing with the media and answering so many questions and all that kind of stuff which comes when playing in a hockey hotbed like Montreal or Toronto. And ultimately I think because of his back injury last year, maybe he wanted a little bit extra term, a little bit extra security in case he does end up battling any additional injuries. The amount of money Montreal apparently was offering on an annual basis wasn't substantially more than Carolina, but the fact that he turned down more money to some seemed a little bit questionable, but ultimately he wanted to play in Carolina as opposed to Montreal, and I think those were the reasons why, and it kind of makes sense. But all that speculation we had heard before about Montreal being very interested in Gardiner was indeed true. It's also believed other teams like Winnipeg and Vancouver had also inquired as well. I'm not sure they went as far as making an official offer, but they were in the mix. And the Maple Leafs were ultimately involved in the mix a little bit as well, but not nearly as much as the other teams. Staying with the theme here, former Toronto Maple Leafs Patrick Marleau, who's still looking for a contract and wants to play this season after being bought out. He was rumored to be linked to the Edmonton Oilers, and now we're hearing from NHL insiders that that's likely not going to happen. There might have been some interest at some point, but the Oilers don't appear to have really any serious interest in signing Patrick Marleau. The only other team that's been mentioned in the past was the Arizona Coyotes. I'm not really sure that there's a fit there looking at their roster, looking at their cap situation, that it makes sense, but they have been a team that's been mentioned before, so barring some other type of move, which really not really sure why teams would want to go through the trouble of making roster adjustments and clearing cap space for a 40-year-old veteran who's clearly slowing down. I mean, he's had a great career. With a lot of respect for Patrick Marleau and what he's accomplished, but at this stage in his career, he's just not going to be that big name that you're going to make that big effort to bring in. So I guess we will see. Maybe a team like Anaheim, who's not too far from San Jose, might have some interest. I'm not sure. At the same time, they're trying to get younger too, so not really sure Patrick Marleau is going to end up finding an opportunity. Ultimately, he could have stayed in Toronto. He had a contract. He had a full no-trade clause. He did have to approve that deal to go to the Hurricanes, who ultimately bought him out, but they again said they would have gladly had him on the roster and played for the season if he wanted to, but he was not interested in that, so they proceeded to buy him out of the final year of the contract. But ultimately, it's really hard to say, and they can't really say with any kind of certainty that Marleau is actually going to have a place to play for the coming year. Now jumping over to the Leafs rival, the Boston Bruins, a couple of quick notes from them. They have extended head coach Bruce Cassidy, which is believed to be a 3-year contract, somewhere around the $3 million range. Now, of course, coaches' salaries are not discussed and disclosed publicly like many of the players' salaries are, but based on Pierre LeBrun, that's what he believes is in the range of, is around $3 million. So, of course, that's a nice extension for Cassidy, who's been a fantastic coach for the Bruins. He's done a great job. Of course, they're fresh off their Stanley Cup final appearance where they unfortunately lost to the St. Louis Blues last year. But he's done a great job. He's certainly had the team where they've gone through a lot of adversity and injuries, and he's certainly done a pretty good job, I think, with the younger players as well. So I think Coach Cassidy certainly deserves that extension, and we'll see what he can do in Boston over the next few years. And heading into training camp, it's also been revealed that their top center iceman, Patrice Bergeron, is battling a groin problem heading into training camp, so he might be limited on what he can do during the activities for camp. But he was reassuring during an interview that he said he would be ready to start the season. But certainly another potential injury issue for them to deal with here right out of the get-go, which is not good news. They've already got a banged-up blue line and some other question marks. They've got Carlo and McAvoy unsigned. Hopefully with some other defensemen getting signed here, that'll kind of move things along with those negotiations. But they certainly have a lot of question marks heading into the season. But they are certainly in good hands under Coach Cassidy, who's proven that he can handle the adversity and juggling the lineup and really getting the most out of this team on a nightly basis. Now, as I mentioned, we do have a couple other signings here today. Of course, we did discuss the possibility of Pavel Zacha heading to the KHL, but as I mentioned in that video, it wasn't quite clear if he had agreed to terms or if he had actually signed or whatnot, but clearly that wasn't the case, and he has re-signed with New Jersey, so that's been covered off now. He's got a 3-year contract at $2.25 million, and of course, like many of the other RFAs, the third year has the higher salary, which is going to be what's based on for his qualifying offer on his next contract, so clearly that seems to be the strategy for a lot of these restricted free agents right now. If they can't be given the contract to take them directly to UFA status, then they want that 3-year bridge deal where they can get the higher qualifying offer for the next year if they can't come to terms on a more lucrative contract, which will ultimately take them to free agency anyway. So either way, that seems to be the trend right now. But in Minnesota, now they've come to terms with their restricted free agent forward Kevin Fiala, so now their contracts are completely settled and all done. His average annual value works out to be $3 million per year, but Kevin Fiala only signs for 2 years. So that's a little bit different from some of the other more recent RFA signings that we've seen. So, of course, he will still be an RFA at the end of the contract, but he will have arbitration rights, and he'll still need 2 more years of service in order to become an unrestricted free agent. But again, like the other players that we've seen here, the trend with the RFAs is have the higher salary in year 2 and not have a bonus paid out, and it's all straight salary because that's where their qualifying offers are based off of. Year 1 pays him $2.5 million, and year 2 pays him $3.5 million. So obviously in that next contract, his qualifying offer is going to be $3.5 million. So it guarantees him to go up in salary for the next contract, and can likely get a deal through arbitration if need be, if he can't come to terms with Minnesota on an extension. Now let's jump over here and take a look at the latest on Mitch Marner. There's been a lot of information released through Twitter today between guys like Bob McKenzie, who's a very trusted NHL insider. Got Darren Dreger out there. Chris Johnston as well has been kind of chiming in. They've all had some tidbits of information to add here today. Let's take a look at what Bob McKenzie had to say on Twitter earlier. So basically what Bob McKenzie is saying here in his first tweet is that the Maple Leafs have offered Mitch Marner $11 million over 7 and 8 year terms, but ultimately because the term is longer and slightly less money than Austin Matthews, that his camp are not going to be in agreement to that. It's really kind of hard to wrap your head around all that money being rejected by Marner's camp here. Ultimately, he's been a very productive player for the Maple Leafs. He's been their leading scorer the past couple of years, but he is a winger, and based on how wingers normally get paid, this is a very lucrative contract for somebody coming out of their entry-level deal. But he goes on to say here that the logical solution would be a 3-year bridge, but because Marner wants an average annual value in the $9 to $10 million universe in the third year for qualifying offer purposes substantially higher, Toronto has no incentive to do that bridge at those numbers. Hard to see the way to a settlement. Now, as we've discussed on some of the other recent RFA signings like we did today and in the last few days in other videos, ultimately a lot of these RFAs that are not getting the term to take them directly to free agency are liking these 3-year bridge offers, with the third year being the much higher salary out of the term, so that they can use that for their qualifying offer in the next contract. Ultimately, probably get a 1-year deal, which will take them to free agency unless they get that longer term contract at the bigger money that they ultimately would be in agreement to sign for. So Mitch Marner, it's been rumored that he's looking for $9 or $10 million per year, but with year 3, I mean, we've seen some numbers out there as high as 14 or 15 million, which is kind of crazy. It's hard to say how much truth there is to that. I can definitely see for sure that he'd want year 3 to be the highest, no doubt about that. And I can see them kind of projecting where the cap would be and where they thought his next contract might be and try to aim for that. That's a lot for the Maple Leafs to take on, and certainly would pose some risk for them for sure. But this is ultimately a contract for Marner that he's rejecting a lot of money. There's no doubt about it that Mitch Marner would get way more endorsement deals and make a lot of extra money playing in Toronto, that there's just no way he's going to get in just about any other NHL city. And it's just really hard to wrap your head around the fact that they're having such a difficult time coming to terms when this is what is being offered. Now, like I said, I'm all for players making as much money as they can. Marner needs to decide if he really wants to be a Leaf, that he has to accept their best offer, but this seems like it's kind of getting personal, and it's really at a point where they certainly have long-term implications here on the relationship between Marner and the team. There could already be a situation where the relationship could be damaged because of all the negotiating, and really it's hard to say how this is going to end, but it's just kind of crazy to think of this kind of money is being offered. He's rejecting it. Now, there was also another tidbit here from Chris Johnston of Sportsnet indicating that he feels that the Maple Leafs would like to name a captain this year and that they're leaning towards giving the C to Auston Matthews, but ultimately this contract negotiation with Mitch Marner very well could be a distraction, something they don't want to take care of while that's going on. Ultimately, as we've heard many times as well, that Marner has to feel like he's just as important to the team as Matthews and Tavares. We have also heard rumors that his family feels he should be considered for captain as well, and I think, if they name a captain like Matthews or anybody else really during this contract negotiation before it's all signed and settled, that certainly could put a further rift between the negotiations here, at least according to Johnson. He really feels that could cause issues if that was named before Marner actually signed. So hopefully this saga will come to an end soon, but training camp is opening in a couple of days. There's not much time left in order for Marner to sign and not miss any kind of training camp. Darren Dreger, who's also been reporting on this quite heavily, has also indicated he still feels it's part of the plan for Marner that, say, by the third week of September, if there's no deal in place, that he would go over to Switzerland with the Zurich Lions and start skating and training with them to try to continue to stay in game shape as close as he can while he's continuing to negotiate here with the Maple Leafs. The only other updates we have on the other RFAs around the league right now is that in Winnipeg, Kyle Connor wants a long-term deal. Laine wants a bridge deal. We've kind of heard that before, but that's still out there. With the Flyers, when it comes to Provorov and Konechny, we're hearing now that Provorov was negotiating a 6-year deal, but after the Werenski 3-year contract, they might be leaning towards that, but it's probably going to be somewhere around 6 times 6.5, something in that range, maybe 6.75, unless they go with the 3-year, which could ultimately give us some different numbers, obviously, but that's kind of what they were looking at before the Werenski contract came to be. And the last update we had out of Braden Point in the Tampa Bay Lightning was that they're leaning towards a bridge contract as well. Many feel that because of the other bridge contracts that the other top guys have signed in Tampa, that he'll follow suit in some capacity and end up doing something similar. But really, if you think that something that was going to be done, it would have been done by now with camp only a couple days away. It's just really hard to say where things are at. Many insiders do feel that we're likely going to see at least a few of these guys end up missing training camp and likely even missing some games to start the NHL season. We're just running out of time. They've had a lot of time to get these contracts negotiated. The fact that they're not done to get all that extra work done to bridge all these gaps here in a couple of days just seems highly unlikely. So as camps open, there's going to be a lot of top names in the RFA world missing from their teams. Of course, as always, want to know your thoughts and opinions on everything discussed here today. Let me know what you think on the Marner saga, what you think of the other contracts recently signed. Will Patrick Marleau find a home to play for the coming season? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments and we'll continue the conversation. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.